Unfortunately, boomers are in serious trouble. Recently, over 30 million boomers retired. We've all heard the term peak boomers. Well, the peak boomers are retiring and they don't have enough assets. So what's going to happen? Let's jump in. Let's look at this report called the Peak Boomers Impact Study. And the subtitle is, a majority of peak boomers are not financially prepared for retirement, and their retirements are going to have a large impact on the broader U.S. economy. Okay, and the report says from 2024 to 2030, the largest and final cohort of the baby boomers, 30.4 million boomers in 2022, born from 59 to 64, will turn age 65. But according to this report, based on their assets, 2/3 of peak boomers will be financially challenged in retirement. 52.5% of peak boomers have assets of under $250,000, and they're going to rely primarily on Social Security as their source of income. The report goes on to say, okay, so what are they going to make in Social Security? In the median Social Security benefit for retired peak boomers, for men, according to this report, will be $28,400 a year. And for women, that number, unfortunately, will be a fourth less, $21,400. And as peak boomers turn 65, the value of their financial assets, not only does this report say they're insufficient, but because they're going to be, most of us are going to have our assets invested in the stock market, that volatility is going to give them additional uncertainty. And the lack of financial stability for peak boomers may be compounded, and likely, unfortunately, will, by the funding uncertainties for Social Security and some defined benefit plans, like from private companies that very few companies give their employees pensions. But those that do, they're saying the funding uncertainties can further compound this uncertainty. And this report is by some really smart people. Let me take a second and just tell you who the people are. Robert Shapiro, and he's advised presidents, senators, and congresspeople. And Luke Stutkin, also he was a member of the White House and was in both the Trump administration and the Biden administration in an advisory role capacity. So that's the bad news. Now let's balance it out, because there's a lot of scary headlines out there. A lot of people are saying, oh, Americans don't have enough money to retire. Oh, we're going to be eating cat food and dog food when we retire. And as a financial advisor myself for over 20 years, I don't think either extreme is true. I think there's a middle ground that says, we want to do what we can to provide as secure of a future for the senior version of who we're going to become. And I want to balance out this first report that says Americans don't have enough money, boomers don't have enough money to retire. I want to balance that out by another report by another smart gentleman, Andrew Biggs, and he wrote an opinion piece in the Wall Street Journal that says you don't have to be a millionaire to retire. Now, $1 million is right now kind of the gold standard that a lot of people would like to have when they retire. But let's look at the subtitle of this article. Among seniors with $50,000 to $100,000 in savings, 86% reported they were doing okay or living comfortably. We need to extract the common sense out of both of these reports, but let me share with you two paragraphs from Andrew Biggs' op-ed in the Wall Street Journal. And he says, how much does a retiree need to feel financially secure? In the Federal Reserve study, the median 65 to 74-year-old who reported doing okay or living comfortably had between $50,000 and $99,000 and $100,000 in savings. The median retiree who reported living comfortably. So the other one was the median 65 to 74-year-old. This is the median retiree reported living comfortably. had between $100,000 and $250,000 in savings. It's impossible to find any evidence, Andrew Biggs goes on to say, that seniors need even a fraction of the about $1.5 million in savings that people think that they need to have in order to be financially secure. Andrew Biggs goes on to say, why then do seniors report such a high level of security on seemingly paltry levels of savings? One reason, Andrew posits, is that Social Security benefits are more generous than what people think. An average couple retiring in 2022 received a total annual benefit of nearly $46,000, and this is up from $34,000 in today's dollars in the year 2000. While hardly extravagant, Andrew Biggs goes on to say, a typical couple can expect an income more than twice the elderly poverty threshold before they touch a penny of their own savings. Now, I want to share with you who Andrew Biggs is because I think it's important. That first study that said boomers don't have enough money and they're in trouble, that was by some smart folks. This is Andrew Biggs' background. He's a senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. That's a think tank. But before joining the American Enterprise Institute, Biggs was the principal deputy commissioner of the Social Security Administration, where he oversaw the Social Security Administration's policy research efforts. And in 2005, he was an associate director of the White House National Economic Council, where he worked on Social Security reform. And in 2001, he joined the staff of the President's Commission to Strengthen Social Security. So Andrew Biggs knows a thing or two about Social Security. And his numbers, that the average couple, I believe he said, has about $46,000 in today's dollars, that matches up with the first study that said the median man has $28,000, the median woman's going to get a Social Security benefit of $21,000. So these numbers mesh up. So what's my takeaway? My takeaway, having worked with hundreds of families, is we do what we can. I do think that the 10% rule, the 10% we save 10% of what we earn, and then we'll be okay. I think that worked for a different generation. That worked for my parents' generation, before Social Security was taxed, before we had to worry about the solvency of Social Security, when many of my parents' friends had a pension. Most of us don't have pensions anymore. And unfortunately, I think we need to save closer to 20% than the old 10% benchmark. And I know that's hard to do. It's super hard to do, particularly given what inflation has done since the pandemic. The inflation after the pandemic has really made many households poor. And it's harder than ever to save, but we have to do what we can. And one thing to think about is what I call the 50-30-20 rule. Look at your expenses maybe over a 3-month or a 6-month period. And look at the necessities, things like your rent or paying your mortgage, things like putting fuel in your car, things like buying groceries to put food on the table, the necessities of life, paying your utility bill. Try to keep that to 50% or less of your after-tax take-home pay. And then if we can keep our wants, right, we have to enjoy the journey. I don't want you to not spend any money on wants. If we can keep our wants to about 30%, maybe a little bit less of our after-tax take-home pay, if we can do those two things, that will leave us the 20%. It's a lot easier to say than it is to do. I know it's aspirational, but we do what we can. And it's also important that we enjoy the journey along the way, which is why I made this video up here. 8 things to stop doing in your 50s and 60s in order to enjoy your journey until you get to retire. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.